The Panama Canal was somewhere that was on my bucket list for such a long time, and I've recently been fortunate enough to experience this place for myself, not just once, but twice, on two very different cruise ships, offering completely different experiences each time. In this video today, I want to share with you some of the things that I feel are critical for you to think about if you're planning to experience the canal, so that you can make sure that you get the most out of your day and don't potentially leave feeling a little bit disappointed. The first time I saw the canal was on board Cunard's Queen Elizabeth. I was on that cruise ship for a 14-night trip out of Los Angeles, California, heading across to Fort Lauderdale in Florida. That route obviously meant that I completed a full transit of the Panama Canal from the Pacific side all the way through to the Atlantic. The second time was on board a very different cruise ship, and that was Holland America's Rotterdam. She's a much bigger ship, and the reason why that's relevant will become apparent later in this video. I was on Rotterdam for 12 nights, and during that cruise we took in multiple Caribbean islands, including the ABC Islands. We then headed over to places like Colombia before heading in to the canal for what would be a much shorter experience than the full transit that I took on Queen Elizabeth a few weeks before. In this video today, I want to share with you some of my tips and some of my advice to hopefully make sure that you can get the most out of your Panama Canal experience. This is somewhere that most people will see, if at all, once in their lifetime. So hopefully I can help you to enjoy as best as you can. If you've just found my channel today, then hello and welcome. I'm Fraser, and I use my YouTube channel to share my cruise experiences all around the world to hopefully help you plan yours too. I have seen so many parts of the world by ship. I've got so much more to show you. So if you do enjoy this video and if you find it useful, it would be amazing if you would give it your thumbs up and also come along with me. It's totally free of charge for you to do. All you have to do is click that subscribe button and welcome on board. Anyway, let's kick off today by talking about the canal itself. The history here is absolutely fascinating. First off, this canal wasn't actually constructed by the people of Panama. Back in 1881, the French started construction on what they hoped would become the Panama Canal, with the goal of significantly reducing the journey time from the Pacific side over to the Atlantic, because historically you would have had to make the journey all the way down south and back up again. During the efforts of the French, one of the most significant challenges they faced was tropical diseases. Think things like malaria, yellow fever. Diseases of that nature unfortunately wiped out tens of thousands of lives during the construction of the canal. In 1904, the United States acquired the canal from the French, and that's when they then kicked off proceedings to finish the job. The waters of the Pacific and the Atlantic then finally met on May 10th, 1913, and the first ever commercial transit of the canal from one side to the other was completed on August 15th, 1914. In December 1999, Panama then took control of the canal from the United States. And the most recent significant milestone that we need to think about today, but more on it later, is that in December 2016, a huge expansion project for the Panama Canal, which doubled its capacity, that's right, doubled, was completed. In terms of how the canal itself is structured, what should you expect if you complete a transit? If you enter on the Atlantic side on a ship using the old lock system, more on that later, then you are going to pass through one set of locks at the start of the day. They're called Gatun locks, and the purpose of these lock chambers is to lift you high enough to enter a huge body of water called Gatun Lake. This lake then will take multiple hours for a cruise ship to pass through, and after that you'll reach what's called Calibra Cut or Galliard Cut or Gaillard Cut, depending on who you speak to, before you then reach two further lock systems to enter the Pacific on the other side. The two lock systems that you'll find over there, up first you'll hit the Pedro Miguel locks, and secondly you've got the Miraflores locks, after which you're back in the ocean. Did you know that a full transit of the Panama Canal takes an entire day. When I was on board Queen Elizabeth, it took us about 9 hours to complete the transit. The general advice from cruise lines is that the transit should take anywhere between 8 and 10 hours. But again, more on how you can prepare yourself for such a long day as we go through this video. The first thing you need to understand if you are hoping to see the Panama Canal by cruise ship is whether or not your cruise ship is going to complete a full transit of the canal or a partial transit. First of all, let's break down what each of them actually means. Up first, a full transit, as the name suggests, is a full A to B transit through the canal. That could mean that you start on the Atlantic side, you then transit through the exact structure of locks as we spoke about a second ago, and you finish on the Pacific side, or it might mean that you do things the other way around and go from the Pacific to the Atlantic. If you flip that and think about what a partial transit means, that will usually mean that you'll leave on a cruise ship from typically Florida on the Atlantic side. You'll move through one set of locks and then you'll spend some time in Gatun Lake. On those cruises, you can often take excursions on either a small boat or on buses if your cruise ship can dock, and that's a pretty easy and pretty good way to see the canal for yourself without booking a cruise that takes you on the full transit. Personally, I enjoyed the full transit far more than the partial transit for a number of reasons that I'm going to share with you throughout this video. The main reason for me was the appreciation of scale. When I completed the partial transit, I did enjoy seeing the lock system. It was fascinating to see how the ship could be lifted from here to here using the lock chambers, but I wouldn't have really appreciated the whole scale of this thing had I not completed the full transit a few weeks prior. So if it were up to me, if I was cruising the Panama Canal again, I would be far more likely to book a full transit than I would be a partial transit. However, the partial transit is still fascinating. Let's now move on to talk about the old lock system versus the new lock system and what that could mean for your cruise. As the Panama Canal grew in popularity and modern ships grew larger and larger, it got increasingly difficult to get ships through the old canal system. This then led to a massive expansion program in recent years, which has seen the canal double, yes, double its capacity through the introduction of a new shipping lane. I find the concept of this absolutely amazing. This new lane consists of multiple new lock systems, namely the Agua Clara locks and the Kokolai locks. In short, in order to allow these modern day ships to pass through, the locks are much, much bigger when you go through the new system versus the old. While they're still amazing, I found the old system to be far more enjoyable and far more impressive. But let me show you what I mean. The footage that you're looking at now was taken as we passed through the old lock system on board Cunard's Queen Elizabeth. You can see here that the lock walls are really, really close to the ship, almost to the point where I just could not understand how it was actually possible to come through here on a massive cruise ship. To help you compare, this footage was taken when I was on board Holland America's Rotterdam and we passed through the new locks. You can see that this is still very impressive, but the walls of the locks are much, much further away when you come through the new system because these locks are built to accommodate massive container ships to get them through. So actually, when we were coming through on Rotterdam, there was a lot of space on either side. Another thing to think about is that when you transit through the new lock systems, you're going to be joined in the locks by tugboats, which will help to keep the ship in place as it's lining up and as it's moving through. This is entirely different to the old lock system. If you move through the old locks, you're going to be connected by ropes to mechanical mules on land, which essentially help to keep the ship really tightly in place as you transit through to avoid it hitting the walls on either side. Now, although these mules are moving through with the ship, they actually don't pull the ship, which is another thing that I found incredible about the Panama Canal and how it's set up. The cruise ship at all times is under its own power and under its own steering. The mules simply help to hold it in place. So personally, if you want the true Panama Canal experience, you have to try and see the old locks at some point during your lifetime. How do you know if your cruise ship is going to pass through the old locks or the new locks? Well, to be honest, it's not as simple as there's a really easy way to know. But if you've never heard of the term Panamax before, then listen up, because a Panamax cruise ship is a type of ship that's been specifically designed to pass through the Panama Canal's old lock system. Don't worry though, I'm not about to start rhyming off every single cruise ship on the planet to tell you whether or not it's Panamax. A really quick search on Google of, for example, Panamax and the name of your ship should confirm whether or not it falls into that category. If it does, then there's a pretty strong chance that you'll get to go through the old locks on your cruise. If it doesn't, it simply won't fit, and there's a pretty strong chance that you'll be going through the new lock system. Next, you need to think about whether or not there's anything specific about the Panama Canal that you want to see while you're on your cruise. The reason why this is so important is that if you complete a partial transit, you won't see a huge part of the canal. If you complete a full transit, okay, it's maybe not that important to think about landmarks because you'll see the whole thing. But yes, if you do a partial, you really do have to think about this. For example, if on your hit list you want to see the skyline of the city of Panama, you do not want to complete a partial transit of the canal starting from the Atlantic side, because it's all the way over on the Pacific and you're not going to see that as part of spending a day in Gatun Lake or docking nearby. You will want to do the full transit. There's also a number of different lock systems, a number of different bridges, and you'll pass by a number of different villages, settlements and viewpoints as you progress through the canal. So if there is any particular point that you want to see, just make sure that the cruise you're looking at booking is definitely going to show you that. Next, remember that each side of the canal can offer you a completely different experience when it comes to cruising. If you take the East Coast, for example, or the Atlantic side is probably the easier way of thinking about it, the Atlantic offers you the ability to cruise in and out of Florida. You'll get to take in places all around the Caribbean, maybe the ABC Islands. You'll maybe head across to Colombia before heading into the canal, some parts of Mexico that you maybe would really enjoy on a cruise, and then back up to Florida. However, cruising from the other side, in my case, Long Beach, California, you're able to take in places like Costa Rica, the west coast of Mexico, and places which are maybe a little bit less cruised to than some of the tourist hubs over in the Caribbean. The reason why it's really important to think about this is that if you're taking a cruise and you're expecting hot weather, beach climates, and you end up somewhere like Costa Rica, which is a much more tropical climate, you might be disappointed and you might wish that you had chosen to see the canal from the other side. Because while the canal is amazing and it will take a day to see on your cruise, you need to remember that your cruise isn't just one day. There's maybe another 10 days or another 12 days or however long your cruise is, that you need to make sure that you're perfectly happy with the rest of the itinerary. The next piece of advice that I'd share with you if you're planning to see the Panama Canal is on the point of booking your excursions privately. If you have followed me for a while, then you'll know that I'm not the biggest advocate of cruise line excursions because I often prefer to throw my shoes on and go and explore the port myself rather than have a bus of friends who also go and discover together. In this part of the world though, my advice would be a little bit different, and I would say that you're better booking your excursion directly with the cruise line. Let me tell you why. During my cruise with Holland America on board Rotterdam, we were planning to dock in the port of Cologne, which would then allow people to head off and explore themselves. However, at the point of my cruise, there was a huge amount of political unrest and a lot of protesting going on in the area, which therefore meant that our cruise ship wasn't able to dock. This then meant that anybody who had booked their excursions independently then risked losing all of their money on those excursions because they wouldn't be able to cancel in time, but anybody who had booked direct with Holland America would simply receive a refund straight back onto their onboard account. Now, to stress again, this isn't advice that I would usually offer for loads of different parts of the world, but over here in this region, I think you're better safe than sorry and just book direct with the cruise line just in case anything goes wrong. The other thing that you need to think about here is that this part of the world may not be overly well connected with your next port of call, which therefore will make it difficult if you explore independently and you happen to miss the ship. That is something that, touch wood, I have never done, but over here it could be a nightmare to suddenly be stuck in Panama or be stuck in Cologne trying to get to a Caribbean island to meet the ship. So again, better safe than sorry. Stick with booking your excursions here through your cruise line. For my next piece of advice, let's think about the day itself. You've booked the cruise, you've looked forward to it for months or maybe even years. You've packed your bags, you've got to the cruise port, and you are on the ship ready to see the Panama Canal for yourself. But when it gets to the day of your experience, what do you need to think about? Up first, let's think about something that might be obvious to some, and that is that you need to plan where you'd like to see the canal from, ideally in advance of getting to it on the day itself. Maybe you want to watch from the pool deck facing the wake at the back of the ship, or maybe you'd prefer to stand outside facing forward so that you can see the hull of the ship and you can see which direction you're going in. Most cruise ships will also have lounges that are specifically designed for taking in views, but the advice I would give is that if you want to sit in here, you're probably going to have to get up early because these seats will be among the first to go, and people quite often will make themselves at home in these lounges for the entire day. So if you want to sit in the lounge to watch your transit, set your alarm and get up nice and early. One viewing area that was absolutely remarkable on both my Cunard and Holland America trips was the very front of the ship. Now, this part of the ship is usually closed off to regular passengers, but the captain is sometimes able to authorise to have that section open during the transit of the canal. What this then allows you to get is a full forward-facing, uninterrupted view of what's ahead, and it is absolutely amazing. The advice that I would give you if you are hoping to get out and see the canal transit from the very front of the ship is that if it's closed to regular passengers for the rest of your journey, it will be very, very busy out there, especially at the start of the day. Now, what I found was that I actually preferred to wander around the ship and take in the views from all around in all different directions. I then headed out to the front of the ship later in the day when the novelty had perhaps worn off for people, when they were relaxing in a lounge to cool down in the afternoon, and I was able to enjoy a much quieter front of the ship at the much later parts of the day. But when you are going through a lock system, for example, you should expect that front viewing area to be really, really busy. Next, plan to wake up early. On most Panama Canal cruises, your day will begin around 6 a.m. This was certainly the case for both my time with Cunard and also Holland America. Now, I opted to wake up early to go and take in the views on both of those cruises, while a lot of my fellow passengers were relaxing, looking at what was going on from either the main dining room at breakfast or the onboard buffet. I then chose to eat breakfast slightly later those days, which meant I was able to enjoy the open decks, largely to myself for a large amount of the time, and then I got a much quieter breakfast experience later on when people were then out on the pool deck looking at what they were seeing as we were cruising through the canal. Entering on the Pacific side, you're going to start your day by passing by the city skyline of Panama City and also passing under the Bridge of the Americas. And if you're entering on the Atlantic side, your first attraction is going to be the Atlantic Bridge. Now, these bridges are such a great experience, so please set your alarm, get up nice and early, and go and experience the ship sailing under those bridges. Now, if you have a balcony cabin, maybe this is the day that you would want to book breakfast to be delivered to your cabin, Because what better way to experience the introduction or the entry to the Panama Canal than to be on your own private balcony, sipping a coffee and eating a pastry. On that note, going back to what we said earlier though, if you want to see anything in particular, for example, the Panama City skyline, make sure that your balcony is on the correct side of the ship as you would enter, because you're not going to see it if you're on the wrong side. On the day of the transit itself, please remember 2 items. Up first, sunscreen, and secondly, bug spray. The sun here is so intense. It will burn all day long. So please make sure that if you are planning to experience the canal from the open decks of your ship, make sure that you're wearing protection. Personally, I would wear factor 50 on those days, just to be absolutely certain. And moving on to think about bug spray, this is something that I wouldn't usually recommend people take on a cruise, because usually the ocean air on a cruise ship means that you don't really experience bugs that would bite you on the open decks. However, this is where you have to remember that a canal transit is a very, very different experience, because for large parts of the day, your ship will either be moving incredibly slowly, as it, for example, transits a lock system, or it may not even be moving if you have to anchor in Gatun Lake, for example. Now, the part of the world that the Panama Canal is in is very, very tropical, so you will get quite a lot of bugs, especially when the ship isn't moving forward at pace. Now, there's nothing to worry about. You might find that you might get a little bite here or there, but just remember that you're surrounded by water which isn't really moving at pace, and you're also on a ship that isn't moving at pace. So things like mosquitoes can be rife here, depending on where you are on the ship, if you're close to the water, and a whole host of other factors. So again, better safe than sorry. Get your sunscreen on and spray some bug spray for this one day of your cruise. Finally, do your research. Don't worry, I'm not about to recommend that you spend day after day after day before your cruise researching all different parts of the Panama Canal. You don't need to do that at all. And in fact, I've already given you some history to the canal in this video. So that first box, you've already ticked it just by watching this video today. You'll probably find that your cruise line will offer you a full guided commentary as you make your way through whatever part of the canal it is that you're going to experience. That will probably come through the loudspeakers going onto the pool deck, maybe the promenade deck, and also through into stateroom or cabin televisions. That is very, very useful to listen to, especially if you've never seen the Panama Canal before, because it will give you so much information. In the run-up to the day itself of transiting through the canal, you'll probably also find that your cruise line will offer talks, presentations, or maybe even lectures about the canal to set the scene and to help you understand the background of the canal, and to also help you understand what you're going to see when you get there. From my own experience, both Cunard and Holland America delivered lectures fantastically on the topic of the Panama Canal, and everybody on board both of those ships was so excited to experience it when we would finally arrive. Hopefully, you've enjoyed hearing a bit more from my experiences of transiting the Panama Canal on a cruise ship. If you have, and if you have found this video useful, it would be great if you would give it your thumbs up, and also support my channel by clicking subscribe, because I have got so much more to tell you about in so many parts of the world to show you. If you'd like to see what it looks like to complete a full transit of the Panama Canal, just head over to this video. If you click there, then you'll get to see a full Pacific to Atlantic transit of the canal from my time on board Queen Elizabeth. I'll see you over there.